Hello everyone, this is Brock Skaggs, and in this video we're going to just have an introduction into the drawing environment in SolidWorks. And so a lot of times people start off with SolidWorks and they'll start modeling parts and modeling assemblies and then kind of bridge that gap from 3D into 2D spaces when they start actually creating detailed drawings of parts and assembly drawings with exploded views and bill of materials and all that good stuff. And so I've got a very simple part here on the screen now, and we'll use that as the basis for our drawing. So let's say, hey, I've created this model in SolidWorks as a part, and now I'm wanting to create a detailed drawing of this part. Then I could maybe print it off and hand it out to somebody on the shop floor, and maybe with a part like this, they are able to go to a manual mill, or not a manual mill, a manual lathe, so to speak, and actually fabricate the part as a prototype. And so how we can do this, one way is to go up here to go File, New. And so I've got a bunch of different options here. I'll just go to the tutorial options, and here's a couple different part templates. There's an assembly template and a drawing template. So let's just accept this drawing template. So most times if you go to work at a company, they'll already have templates put in place. So they'll already have a title block that's more or less tailored to that company's practices here. This is kind of a tutorial one, so just kind of one to give it an example starting point, if you will. And so what I've got here is the drawing view in front of us. We'll just stick with this tutorial template. And on the left hand side, it's already created a pane here to the left saying, hey, do you want to insert a model view? And so that's fine. That's actually what I want to do, is just create a model view right at the beginning. In this dialog box, it's showing all of the parts that are already open in SolidWorks, or the assemblies they could be as well. And so I'm just going to create a drawing of this part, so that's good. If I didn't want to create a drawing of that part, I can go to Browse here and browse your file system for the part you're interested in. So instead of just clicking here in the space like you'd think, I'm going to come up here and click the little Next button. And so this allows me to say things like, okay, what view do I want to place on the part? And so in this case, I want to use the default configuration, and it's the isometric view is what's currently selected, or I could get the front, the top, the right, or the other three orthographic projection style views. I can also say, hey, I want to take hidden lines off or on, so I'll just leave these removed, and let's just stick with this isometric view. And let's say I want isometric in the top right hand corner there. Alright, so I just left click to place the view, and you can see there's a tree structure, as is quite often in SolidWorks, being built on the left hand side. Now it's showing, hey, I've got drawing view 1 here. Now a lot of times in engineering circles you'll have kind of orthographic projection style drawings here. So we might have this isometric view in the top right, but we'd also have like a front or top and a right view possibly. So to create those other views, what I like to do is go over here to the view layout, and I usually go to model view. It's the same sequence of steps here. Pick your model that you're wanting to work with, go to next, and now I'm just going to click the front view. I'll leave it with hidden lines showing, and I'll left click here. And so notice I've placed the front view on the part, and one thing I can do is it automatically pops into a projected view state. So as I pull off of this view, notice I can see the top view being created and the right view, and you also have that dashed line in between that's causing those to keep alignments. So I'm just going to go left click once on top, and I'm also going to come here. I would click here, but really you can see that's not really going to add any more information to this drawing, right? If I look right now, that right view and the front view, just because the geometry of the part show you the exact same thing. So I'm just going to hit escape, and now I've been able to create that front view here, top view here, and we've got an isometric view here. I've got these little blue tick marks for origins. Say I don't want to see those. Actually, I can go to this view and hide option here, and the origins are right here, so I'll go ahead and remove that. So this is all looking good. You can actually move these views around a little bit, but say I want to actually bring geometry, dimensions in here, and so one way to do that is with the annotation tab. And so I'll do this first with the model items, and so I can say, hey, go to the model items. There's a few options here. I can do it on a feature level, or I can say, hey, I want to do this across the entire model like this, and I want to grab the dimensions that are marked for the drawing. And so I'll accept all the other defaults and just hit the green check mark. And so I've got the dimensions showing up now. And the way they're showing up, where they're kind of right aligned here, has to do with the standard which the drawing is following. Let's say I don't really like the standard, instead I want to go to like an ANSI standard. I can change that right now. If I go up to options, it's going to come across on the other screen, so I'll put over document properties now. Notice I'm in some sort of ISO modified, so I'm going to go ahead and change that to ANSI, and you should be able to see these dimensions change a little bit in terms of the way they look. Yep, just like that. And so let's say I like this a little bit better. Now I can move these dimensions around, as you can see. I've got some diameters here. Diameter 1.5 is that outer diameter here. 1.125 is really what this one is. Notice it's showing 1.13. Let's say I want to really see those 3 decimal places there. I can just click on that individual dimension if I want to, and go to the precision area and say, hey, I want that to be 3 decimal places. Pull this around here. I've got the height dimensions. This is actually 2.375. And as you can see, I'm just kind of picking my way across here. This round here, I've got a round here and a fillet here. Really, they both have a radius of 0.125 or an eighth of an inch. I've got one dimension showing here because I created both those round or fillet features inside of the same SolidWorks feature, but I don't have it showing in both. So I might go ahead and create a global note instead. So I'm just going to click on up here, create a note. I usually put them above the title block here, and I can say something like all rounds and fillets are 0.125. And so that allows me to create that note. Now if I've created that note, I probably don't need this drawing here, or this dimension there, excuse me. So I'll just right click on it and say hide. Alright, so we've got some information here. Let's say I've got the overall height, I've got the height of this, there's the first diameter, second diameter, and whole diameter. Okay, we're all in good shape here. So next, usually you'd put a center line right here to show the axis of that hole. And so we can do that in SolidWorks as well at this center line tool. I can just click like the one vertical edge of the inside of the hole, the other vertical edge, and notice it actually applies the center line there. Alright, so we're all in good shape. So before we get to talking too much about the drawing, I do want to mention a little bit of this associativity that happens between the drawing and the part. And so the way I created all these dimensions with this model items tool, these are the driving dimensions that are inside of this sketch. And so inside of the sketches are the boss extrudes as well. And so what this means is I can actually change geometry dimensions here, and it's reflected on the model. And if I change on the model, it reflects back on the part itself. Just to illustrate that real quick, let's change this value here. So I'm going to double click on it. Notice I get that modify dialog box just the same way as if I was inside of a sketch. Let's go 2.50. And so now I've modified that dimension, but it didn't look like it really changed the height. And you're also seeing these kind of hashes in the drawing views. It's basically saying that the model is not at its most recent state. It's out of date. It's stale, if you will. It needs rebuilt, essentially, which is also why you're seeing all of these stoplights here. So if I want to, I can rebuild the model. And notice you visibly saw that boss get taller. And so also now if I go over to the drawing, you'll have seen that boss get taller here as well. So I can actually evaluate this and say, hey, I want to measure from here to here, and now that's 2.875, or specifically just like that dimension, I can go from that face to this face, and it's 2.5 there. Now just like I modified it here, I can also modify it, or modify it in the drawing, I can also modify it here. So I can come back in here, let's make it 2.25, hit enter. Now I need to rebuild on the model. So it moved the model. Now if I go back to that drawing, notice it changed here as well to 2.25 there. So that's all about these driving dimensions there. There are also ways to do dimensioning with the Smart Dimension tool, and the thing to remember here, these are driven dimensions. For instance here, I'll just place this for reference, but I've got like that 2.63 dimension there. Really it's 2.625 if I throw 3 decimal places there. The overall height here. Typically you wouldn't want to do this because you've got some tolerance stack possible issues here between these two dimensions and this one. But one thing I wanted to see here is that this is a driven dimension and these are driving. So like if I double click on this guy, notice I don't get that same modify box popping up. Whereas if I double click on this one, it does have the modifying box popping up there. So that's where one way you can say that these are driving and the others are driven there. So just keep that in mind as you're working with the drawings inside of SolidWorks. A couple other notes to make is this idea of the title block area. We've got some issues here with like the drawing number exceeding the space and everything there. But there's kind of two modes inside of the drawing. One is when you're editing the sheet, and one is when you're editing the sheet format. So right now we're in the edit sheet mode, and so this is where you typically put your drawing views in there. You put like notes like this. You also would typically put all your dimensions in there, your center lines and so forth. But sometimes when you're interacting with the format or the title block, you go into edit sheet format mode. And so the way you do that is you find a kind of blank space in the drawing, and you right click and you select the edit sheet format from the context menu. If I hit edit sheet format, you notice all of a sudden all of my drawing views and dimensions are gone. Everything we worked for is now gone. Don't worry, it's still there. It's just hidden from view. And now you can see I can actually get down in the title block. So one thing, for instance, I could come in here and start playing with the size of this until it fits in the space. There we go, size 10, just like you're used to in other word processors there. I could also come in here. Notice some of these have links to them. Like you can see as I hover over that, it says PRP drawn by. That's kind of outside the scope of what I want to get to in this video, but that allows you to reference custom properties either in the drawing or the model to actually drive that value in that note field. Or if you want to, you can actually just create your own notes down here and say, this is a note as well. So you can conceivably fill out the title block that way as well. So I'll just go ahead and accept this. And so that box up there allowed me to get back to edit sheet. And so now I'm back in that edit sheet mode, and this is kind of all locked up, so to speak. So again, edit sheet mode is where you put your drawings views in, your dimensions in, and then you can right click and go edit sheet format, and that's where you're working with the title block. And then here you can right click and say edit sheet to get back to the other mode, or you can click this button here in the top right. That'll also kick you back here. Alright, so that's a very quick introduction to the drawing environment inside of SolidWorks. If you've used things like AutoCAD where you're used to drawing individual lines and having to lay things out, SolidWorks is a lot quicker than that because you get to take advantage of a lot of that solid geometry that you've already spent the time modeling up at the part or the symbol level. And then SolidWorks' kind of rendering engine, if you will, is able to create a lot of that line geometry for the drawing itself there. So it's a pretty slick workflow, if you will, to kind of rapidly create these drawing views. So I hope that all makes sense. Hopefully, if this is the first time you're seeing the drawings, you're not too intimidated. It seems fairly user intuitive. Kind of makes sense there. And so hopefully this helps you get started making drawings of your solid models inside of SolidWorks.